Okay, so now we will talk about the second part of nonlinear pricing, which is second-degree price discrimination. Okay, so second degree, oh wait, before, sorry. Let me share my screen. Okay, yeah. So second degree price discrimination. Once the seller's ability to identify different types of buyers or reduce arbitrage among them is reduced, complete surplus extraction by means of perfect price discrimination is no longer possible. Okay, so what would happen is that high demand consumers will pretend to be low demand and enjoy a lower charge and get some surplus, even if with consuming fewer units of the good. Okay, and we'll see that soon. Two-part tariff, which we discussed earlier, which is a fixed fee and a per unit cost. Meanwhile, block pricing, which is a menu of quantities and the total charge, where the total charge is the entire surplus by the consumer. They cannot earn as much as previously. Okay, so here's our situation. Okay, this is exactly the same as the earlier case with old and young, but now we have 16 high demand and low demand. 16 for high demand, so 16 down here, and then 12 for low demand and 12 for low demand here. All right, so let's think about first the two-part pricing. Will that work? Well, under two-part pricing, you are charging 4, and then you will ask them to pay 32 plus 32 plus 8 for the high. And then for low demand, you'll charge a per unit of 4, and you will charge them 32. The problem is the high demand would want to get the package of or the fixed fee of the low. Okay, they would want to continue consuming 12, get charged at 4 per unit, and if they're only going to pay 32, that means they will get 40 left for them, right? So they would want that entry fee. They would pretend to be a low customer. Okay. Now for the block pricing, it would also be similar because it would also fail. So in that case, the high demand consumers would prefer to, instead of buying 72 for 102 or 120, so that's it. Sorry, 12 for 120, 12 units for this entire area under the demand curve, 32, 32, 32, 8, 16, that's 120. Instead of that, they would prefer to buy 8, okay, and pay 64, which is what the low people are paying. 32, 32, that's 64. 32, 32, 64, that would leave them with a utility of 32. So they would prefer to consume less and have extra money in the end than purchase 12, but then all of their consumer surplus is transferred to the monopolist. So that's exactly what is said here in this slide. So resort owners can employ a variant of block pricing. Block pricing, the variant can be designed to identify and separate the different types of customers. This imposes a constraint on the owner and will not yield as much as first-degree price discrimination. However, it will improve on simply offering all consumers the low package, which is 64 and 8 rides. And that will yield 32 of profits for each. 32 for the low and 32 for the high. So here's the mechanism. Here's the mechanism. First, you offer the low package, right? 64, 8 rides. And you will be extracting 32 pesos from the low. Now, offer a second package offered to the high demand consumers. However, you make sure to leave them 32 bucks, right? Because 32 bucks is exactly enough to get them to move to the low package. Okay, so instead of charging them 120, you charge them 32 minus 120. Okay, and it happens to be 88. 88 for 12 rides. That's better because if you look at the graph here, instead of paying them the whole thing, which is 120, you leave them 32, right? And that's better for you because that gives you at least an extra 8 and an extra 16, this area down here. Okay? Now, two options have been carefully designed to solve the identification and arbitrage problems by inducing the customers themselves to reveal who they are through the purchases they make. The average price of the ride for low-demand consumers is 8. That's 64 divided by 8, that's 8. The average price per ride of 8, 8, and 12 is 7.33. The second package offers a quantity discount relative to the first. Quantity discounts are common to woo high-demand consumers. Now, you can do better. You offer the low-demand consumers a different package, less than 8 rides, so less than the perfectly competitive output. Charge them their entire surplus, which I would invite you to calculate that. That's $59.50. The profit from each consumer of the low is 31.5, which is 50 cents less than the old package. Right? Remember, per unit, the cost is 4. So the variable cost is 4 times 7. Okay. High demand consumers will have a maximum willingness to pay for 7 rides of $87.50. So buying this package, the low package, gives them a surplus of 28. Okay. So how do you get that? 87.50 minus 59.50. That's 28. Okay, for buying 7. Okay. So this just means that if you were to offer them 7, their total willingness to pay for 7 is 87.50. If they have an offer of $59.50, of course they'll say yes to that, and that's a surplus of 28, as opposed to the old one, which offers them, as opposed to the old one with 120 and 12, which leaves them 0, right? That's always the comparison. As a result, the owner can increase the price of the 12 lift ride package. So instead of offering them 32, right, you can now offer 32 pesos, you can offer them 28 pesos. So it's 120 minus 28. In this case, the price for the 12 lift package is now 92. So you're offering them less money to stay with a high demand by lowering the attractiveness, basically, of the low demand. Okay, you're lowering the attractive of the low demand here because you're decreasing the quantities for the low demand. So this example illustrates the importance of the incentive compatibility constraint. Any package designed to attract low demand consumers constrains the ability of the monopolist to extract surplus from high demand consumers. It's more profitable to reduce the number of units offered to low demand consumers, as this allows the price charge for the package aimed at high demand consumers to be increased. At the extreme, you may not want to serve low demand customers at all, because by lowering the offer, right, the quantity offer to the low demanders, then you would tend to decrease the attractiveness of the low demand package, and then decreasing the money you will have to pay for the high demand, right? And if you find that decreasing quantities for the low tends to benefit you more because it allows you to extract more money from the high, then it's probably there's a possibility that not serving low demand customers is in fact the optimal optimal set of packages for the monopolist. So it will only, in the end, offer one package only for the high customers, and then extract exactly the entirety of their surplus, right? Whether the monopolist has an incentive to serve low demand customers will depend on the number of low relative to high ones. So the cost of serving low demand customers, incentive compatibility constraint on the extraction of surplus from high demand ones. So in general, here's our general take home. If consumers' willingness to pay can be ranked by type, then any optimal second degree price discrimination will have the following properties. extract the entire consumer surplus of the lowest demand type, but leave some consumer surplus for the higher types. Again, to stop them from moving to the low demand package. Contain quantity, usually it will contain a quantity that's less than the social optimal quantity for all consumer types other than the highest, because you want to have the highest quantity for the highest demand type. And for the low demand types, you want to decrease the quantity sold to them and make it less attractive for the high demand types to purchase those packages, those low quantity packages. And it will exhibit quantity discounting. In fact, the more you make the low demand package less attractive, that means you sell fewer quantity under the low demand, and then the average price for the low demand will rise, and that's how you will get even more quantity discounting. All right, so in general, second-degree price discrimination enhances the ability of the monopolist to convert consumer surplus into profit, but does so less effectively than first degree, right? Because as long as you are selling to a low demand, you have to give money to the high demanders to make sure that they purchase the high demand product. Variant of the block pricing scheme is used to solve identification and arbitrage, but the incentive compatibility constraints that must be satisfied limits the firm's ability to extract all of the consumer surplus. Okay, so I'll let you read this. This is easy. Okay. So under first degree personalized pricing, this entire surplus, this entire area under the triangle until QIC, is taken as the monopolist's profit, okay? But under second degree, it's going to be somewhere less, which is QI, okay? That's the point of this one. Okay, so PD increases social welfare of consumer group I if it increases the quantity offered to that group. Okay. First degree price discrimination always increases welfare, even though it extracts all consumer surplus, right? Because remember, first degree price discrimination sets the quantities at the perfectly competitive output. And all it does is to transfer all of that surplus to the monopolist completely, right? So it's efficient because it maximizes social welfare. But there are distributive issues with that. All of the welfare, all of the surplus goes to the monopolist. With second-degree price discrimination, matters are not so straightforward relative to uniform pricing. Okay, uniform pricing for a monopolist, which I remind everyone, you get the total or aggregate demand, then you will get the aggregate marginal revenue, equate marginal cost to that aggregate marginal revenue, which will give you the uniform price across different groups, okay? Now, for the high demand groups, for second degree versus that uniform, it leads them to be supplied with higher quantities. So that's good. So if you're a high demand group, you would want second degree price discrimination because that would tend to cater to you, okay, and would leave you with some money. However, the seller restricts quantity to lower demand groups and perhaps even not supply these groups at all. So we would use the same techniques, the same formula here as with third degree price discrimination. So we're comparing the uniform quantity, okay, uniform price quantity. So these quantities are not uniform. It's the price that's uniform. And then compare it to the discriminatory price quantities here. And then we'll have the low demand types to have less quantity under discrimination, and the high demand types have more quantity. And here's a picture of the gain and the loss, right? Which is exactly the same as the one under third degree. And this is the same formula, right? And the key for change in W to be greater than 0 is for this to be greater than 0. So a necessary condition for a second degree price discrimination to increase welfare is that it should increase total output when compared to uniform pricing. So in third degree price discrimination, total output is unchanged relative to uniform. So there's no guarantee that it will increase prices and increase welfare. The quantity is the same under uniform pricing. But second degree price discrimination could lead to an increase in quantity supplied to both markets and relative to social welfare. Sorry, to both markets relative to the uniform price. Okay, or at the very least, it could lead to a total change in output that's greater than under uniform. And it would, and this is the kicker here, it would increase the quantity supplied to both markets, especially in the case when there are equal number of high demand and low demand consumers. Okay. So the total change in quantity would rise in the second degree price discrimination case versus the uniform if there's equal high demand and low demand customers. Okay. And this picture basically shows us that since these heights are the same, the ones that are really important here is the widths of the boxes or the change in the quantity. So if the total change in the quantity is greater than 0, that means the width of this box is greater than the width of this box. So there is definitely guaranteed going to be an increase in welfare. All right. So next week we will be talking about, we're moving on from monopolists, pure monopolists, to situations where firms operate in an industry and they will have some market power because of horizontal and vertical differentiation. Thank you.